My remarks today draw from the body of research my team and I have conducted at the Atlantic Council's Economic Safecraft Initiative to identify and assess the methods and techniques that China, Iran, Russia, and North Korea employ to circumvent and evade Western sanctions. We've coined this network the Axis of Evasion. My insights also draw on my 15 years of experience as a career civil servant in the U.S. federal government, where I served in the intelligence community.
Maybe a little bit below service.
Okay. Sure. So my remarks also, is that better? Draw on my experience as a career civil servant in the intelligence community at the Treasury Department, the White House, and my last role was at FinCEN, where I was head of intelligence. So I have a significant background in money laundering and big secret scams. In the past 2.5 years at the Atlantic Council, I've led research on G7 coalition sanctions targeting Russia. And through this research, we identified similarities between the sanctions evasion technologies used by Russia and Iran to trade with China, such as the use of the shadow fleet, complex money laundering schemes, alternative payment systems, and cryptocurrencies. Hong Kong has increasingly come up in our research as a hub for sanctions evasion. This is further underscored by the frequent inclusion of Hong Kong-based individuals and entities in U.S. government actions targeting Russian, Iranian, and North Korean sanctions evasion networks. For example, this past June, the Treasury sanctioned more than 30 individuals and entities based in Hong Kong and the UAE tied to Iran's shadow banking network that uses a system of Iranian exchange houses and foreign front companies to launder billions of dollars through the international financial system. And as recently as this past Tuesday, Treasury sanctioned additional individuals and entities based in Hong Kong and the UAE that are part of this growing network and facilitating Iranian oil smuggling. So while Hong Kong continues to come up in sanctions evasion schemes, throughout this conversation, I do think it's important to keep in mind the role that Hong Kong continues to play in the global economy and international financial system. Hong Kong ranks as the third largest financial center in the world and serves as a vital gateway between the East and the West. It's evolved into a major conduit for facilitating financial flows and activity between Western markets and mainland China. And in 2023, the Financial Action Task Force, which is the international standard-setting body for anti-money laundering and countering the financing of terrorism, assessed in its follow-up report on Hong Kong's 2019 mutual evaluation that Hong Kong had made progress on its technical AML-CFT regime and maintains the technical competencies to manage money laundering risks. Hong Kong's technical AML competence was most recently demonstrated this past July when the Hong Kong Monetary Authority took disciplinary action against 3 banks due to deficiencies in their AML-CFT compliance regimes. Beyond finance, Hong Kong stands as a key global trade and shipping hub, with a significant portion of its exports consisting of re-exports destined for China. And the Hong Kong Stock Exchange is ranked among the top 5 largest stock exchanges in the world. As a major financial hub and bridge between China and the West, Hong Kong has emerged as a conduit of financial transactions between Chinese banks in sanctioned countries like Iran, Russia, and North Korea. Beijing has been cracking down on Hong Kong since the imposition of the National Security Law in 2020 and has significant influence over the so-called Special Administrative Region. Notably, and as my colleagues have also mentioned, in 2022, Hong Kong's chief executive John Lee said that the city would not implement U.S. sanctions on Russia, raising concerns that Hong Kong would become a permissible environment for sanctions evasion. It's important to note that Western financial institutions operating in Hong Kong are required to comply with Western sanctions. However, several Chinese banks have subsidiaries in Hong Kong, and Iranian, Russian, and North Korean actors use shell companies with complex ownership structures to get around these sanction compliance measures and ultimately gain access to the global financial system. Given Hong Kong's role as a global financial hub, as well as the role that China and Hong Kong-based individuals and entities play in illicit finance and sanctions evasion, we need to take concrete actions to counter this activity and safeguard the U.S. financial system and broader global financial system from abuse. So I would like to offer the following recommendations, and I am happy to go into more detail on these issues in our conversation. So first, we do need to increase our collective understanding of how the PRC is taking advantage of Hong Kong to launder money and evade sanctions through the financial intelligence collection and analysis, as well as information sharing with like-minded including Australia, Japan, and those that we work with closely. And we need to get a better understanding of not only how China as a state is using Hong Kong, but also Chinese money laundering organizations, which I'm happy to get into in the conversation. Second, we should consider further engagement with Hong Kong authorities to communicate U.S. red lines as they relate to AML/CFT and illicit finance. It's in Hong Kong's best interest to maintain its standing as a global financial hub, and Hong Kong has demonstrated its technical capacity and willingness to address certain money laundering within its jurisdiction, which may create an opportunity for further discussions. Third, we should continue engagement with the private sector and communicate expectations regarding outbound investment screening as it relates to China, Hong Kong, as well as Macau, and referring back to the final rule on outbound investment screening for U.S. investments in certain national security technologies and products in countries of concern that was issued this past January. Finally, we should consider taking additional restrictive economic measures, including targeted financial sanctions on individuals and entities operating in Hong Kong and that are involved in money laundering and sanctions evasion, with a heavy focus on these Chinese money laundering networks, and enforce those actions. We should consider adding additional entities to the non-SDN Chinese military industrial companies list that prevents investment in these different companies that are listed on the stock exchange, and also add additional companies to DoD's 1260H list of Chinese military companies. And lastly, we should consider using FinCEN's 311 authority to identify Hong Kong-based financial institutions as primary money laundering concerns, but only after a comprehensive economic impact assessment to ensure that we are prepared to mitigate any unintended consequences of such an